Hope you guys are having a great day today. My name is Shiv, and welcome back to our playlist for studying for front-end engineering interview questions. Today, we're taking a look at a question that seems simple enough, but it's actually quite tricky. Before we get started with the question, I just want to take a moment and thank everyone for subscribing and watching my videos. We're super close to hitting 100 subscribers, so it means a lot to me that you guys are watching. And if you haven't subscribed yet, smash the subscribe button below. And with that, let's get started. So the question asks us to write a function that animates an HTML element to move towards the right of the screen by a specified distance over a given duration period. The function should utilize request animation method for smoother animations, and we should also explain why we want to use request animation frame over using set intervals or just CSS transitions. Let's jump into the code. So we have a boilerplate here where we've defined our HTML, which is just defining one simple div inside of it with the ID of div. And then we've provided some CSS, very simple CSS. This div has a position absolute, and it's positioned on the left and top on the screen. And now the most common way to animate something in JavaScript would be just to reference the element itself directly, such as this. And then we give it a set timeout, and we position the left position to whatever position we would want to end up in this case 400 pixels. And we're doing this behind a set timeout just so it doesn't happen immediately on JavaScript load. And notice when this is run, so if I press enter, as soon as this is run, for a flash of a second, we're in the beginning here and then we end up here. So if we want to actually animate this, we can use the transition property, which looks something like this. And with transition, we can give it a duration and provide what kind of animation we'd like. And now if I run this, check out what happens. It animates our div 400 pixels from the left side of the screen, and that's due to the transition property, which animates over a 1 second duration. Now, this is a quick and dirty way to do it, but most likely your interviewer is not going to be happy with this. They're going to expect you to consider or think about other approaches. So the first approach is to use a set interval. Set interval can be ran on a particular interval duration. So you can either run it like 60 frames a second or 30 frames a second and so forth. However, set interval is not performant. Browsers have developed a way to make animations more performant and smoother and also avoid CPU usage that way. That's using request animation frame. So the three main benefits is that one, browsers can optimize it, so animations will be smoother. Two, animations in inactive tabs will automatically stop, allowing the CPU to chill. Meaning if I'm running some kind of animation on this tab and I switch tabs, the animation will pause on that old tab and won't continue taking on the CPU usage. Last but not least, it's more battery friendly. So on your phone, on your physical devices, it will help you preserve more battery life. Now, let's take a look at the example of using request animation frame in action. We have a function called animateWrite that takes in three arguments: an ID that we want to reference from our HTML, a distance that we want to move towards, and finally a duration where our animation should run inside of. Then we are defining a start time variable, and I'll mention what that means in a moment. We grab our element from the HTML. If that does not exist, we throw an error. And then we have this animation function that takes in a timestamp. Lastly, we're calling this animateWrite with all of the arguments provided. Our distance is going to be 400 in this case, and our duration is going to be 1 millisecond. And I've created references of those here just so we can refer to them down the line. So now let's build this out. So first and foremost, we're going to have to use request animation frame here. And the request animation returns us a timestamp that we can utilize. So we'll use that timestamp to set the start time. Let's do timestamp. And then what we will do is we'll call animate with our start time. Next, let's consider what we have to worry about in the animate function. The first thing we have to be concerned about is the runtime, which will be equal to the timestamp minus the start time. And let's look at the example. So in the first case, timestamp will be 0, and we set the start time to 0 as well, so it'll be 0 minus 0, which is just equal to 0. Then the second thing we need to worry about is our progress, which is going to be equal to our runtime divided by our duration. Now this is going to be a value between 0 and 1. So in our first case, it's going to be 0, which is our runtime, divided by our duration, which is equal to 1000, which is just equal to 0 in our first run. And lastly, our left position, which will be equal to our progress times our distance. In our first instance, it'll be 0 times 400, which is just equal to 0. Let's build these out. So I'll just copy this just so we don't have to waste time writing this out one by one. So now what we want to say is if runtime is less than duration, then we want to do request animation frame and just call our animate function again. And above this, what we're also going to be doing is we're going to be updating the left position of our element. So we'll say element.style.left equals to a template literal, and it'll say left position px, which is just the CSS representation of it. So as you can see here, our element animates using this formula. So now let's walk through it line by line. So in our first instance, our time step is set to 0, so our start time will also be 0. So we scroll up here. So 0 minus 0 is 0, 0 divided by 1000 is 0, and 0 times 400 is 0. So the first instance, we're really not moving at all. But let's think about the second instance. In the second instance, our timestamp now is not 0 anymore. Our timestamp could be something along the lines of maybe 20 pixels, right? So we'll say 20 pixels minus 0 now is equal to 20 pixels, right? And then we'll do 20 pixels divided by 1000 is 0.02, right? And now we're doing 0.02 times 400, which gives us an 8 pixel movement. So that means now it's animating 8 pixels. So this will continuously run as long as runtime is less than duration. If it's ever greater, request animation frame will not be called recursively, and this will not be called again. Let's try changing our movement to maybe 200 pixels, and we want to move it inside of a 2000 millisecond duration period. So you can see it's quite slower, and it ends at 200 pixels. Let's just confirm that. So yes, 200.0004. And that is how you solve this problem. If you guys have any confusion or questions regarding how these are calculated, again, check out frontendlead.com. The differences between request animation frame and set intervals. I'm also explaining line by line what's happening, how each calculation is run, and what is the purpose of it. And yeah, if you guys found this video helpful, press the like button below and subscribe. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, bye.